20 biblical superfoods modern science just discovered. Hello, herbalists! What if the most powerful healing foods on the planet weren't invented by modern science? What if they already existed 3,000 years ago? What if the healthiest people who ever lived ate them daily without knowing exactly why they worked, but knowing for sure that they worked? While we count calories and chase the latest fad diet, there is a text that has been prescribing specific foods for millennia that current science is proving fight disease, reduce inflammation, and transform health at the cellular level. These aren't spiritual symbols. They're superfoods backed by real clinical research. And today I'm going to show you 20 of them. Stick around until number 13. It was so rare and valuable in ancient times that kings used it as currency. And modern nutritionists consider it one of the most nutrient-dense foods ever studied. And the number 20 was called the gift of God in ancient scriptures. Modern oncologists are astonished by what it does to cancer cells. Like this post if you already have any of these in your kitchen. And subscribe. We post every week. There's an idea that's been very effectively sold to us, and it deserves to be questioned. The idea that modern nutrition knows more than any other era in history, and that everything before was superstition, intuition, or chance. But it turns out that the people who wrote these texts were not primitive. They were extraordinary observers. They paid attention to what healed them and what killed them. And they built their culture, their rituals, their agriculture, and even their sacred architecture around those observations. And now modern science, with its clinical trials, its double-blind studies, its biochemical analysis, is reaching the same conclusions. Olive oil reduces inflammation. Honey kills bacteria. Barley lowers cholesterol. Garlic fights infections. Almonds protect the heart. The book was right. It just didn't explain the mechanism, because the mechanism wasn't the point. The food was the point. The healing was the point. Today we're going to explore that knowledge together. Food by food. I'm going to show you 20 foods. But first, herbalists, I need to make you 3 promises. First, one of these foods was used to cure a king's life-threatening infection 2,700 years ago. The prophet didn't pray. He prescribed a poultice, and the king was cured. Modern science has only just understood why it worked. Second, there is a spice on this list that Jesus mentions by name in the Gospel of Matthew, a spice so valuable that it was paid for as tribute. And it turns out that modern studies confirm exactly the medicinal uses attributed to it. And third, the last on the list may be the most surprising. A food that was believed for centuries to be desert food, survival food, food for ascetics, and which turns out to be one of the most documented natural therapies against intestinal pathogens. Ready? Let's begin. Number 1. Extra virgin olive oil. Over 140 references in the Bible. Food, medicine, and sacred ointment all in one. Let's start at the beginning, because in the ancient world, olive oil was literally the beginning of almost everything. Food, fuel for lamps, medicine, sacred substance. Kings were anointed with it. Wounds were bandaged with it. The Good Samaritan in the Gospel of Luke poured oil and wine on the wounds of a stranger. That wasn't poetic. It was medical protocol. The Bible mentions it more than 140 times. No other food reaches that number. Extra virgin olive oil is one of the most studied foods on earth. The Mediterranean diet, built upon it as a cornerstone, has been linked in hundreds of clinical trials to lower rates of heart disease, cancer, inflammation, cognitive decline, and all-cause mortality. The main compound responsible is oleocanthal, a polyphenol that acts almost identically to ibuprofen in reducing inflammation. And that's not a metaphor. It literally has the same mechanism of action. But be aware, olive oil in the ancient world wasn't the refined, hot-processed product many people buy today. It was cold-pressed, unfiltered, and freshly harvested. A living food, packed with antioxidants and vitamin E that the body recognizes and uses immediately. A daily tablespoon of quality extra virgin olive oil, used liberally in cooking, and applied topically for skin care and wound healing, just as they did in the biblical world. Number 2. Raw honey. Proverbs, Song of Songs, 1 Samuel. Nature's most powerful antimicrobial. As long as it's raw, honey and milk under your tongue. Song of Songs. Eat honey, for it is good. Proverbs. Jonathan dipped his staff in honey, and his eyes lit up. First Book of Samuel. The Bible doesn't celebrate honey as a sweet metaphor for prosperity. It celebrates it as a food that gives strength, clarity, and life. And modern science understands exactly why. Raw honey is one of the most powerful natural antimicrobials ever studied. Clinical trials confirm that it can kill antibiotic-resistant bacteria, including MRSA, through 3 simultaneous mechanisms. It generates hydrogen peroxide in contact with tissue, has a low pH that destroys pathogens, and contains a protein called defensin, one that actively destroys bacteria. A special type, Manuka honey, is used today in certified medical dressings in hospitals around the world. The key word is raw. The moment you heat honey above 40 degrees Celsius, you begin to destroy the enzymes and beneficial compounds that make it medicinal. The honey that our ancestors ate, extracted directly from the hives, unfiltered, unheated, was functionally different from the clear, stable syrup found in most supermarkets. Archaeologists have found 3,000-year-old honey in Egyptian tombs that was still edible. No modern processed food can say the same. Apply raw honey to wounds to prevent infection and speed healing. Take a tablespoon at the first sign of a sore throat. Mix it with warm water and lemon for immune support. Number 3. Figs. 2 Kings 20 verse 7. The prophet Isaiah prescribes a poultice of figs. Here is the story I promised at the beginning. This is the story I promised in the hook. King Hezekiah was dying from a severe infection, probably an anthrax or a severe skin ulcer. The prophet Isaiah not only prayed for him, but also ordered that a poultice of figs be prepared and applied directly to the wound. King Hezekiah was healed. For centuries this was read as a pure miracle, until modern researchers analyzed the fig and found that Isaiah's prescription had a real and documentable biochemical basis. Figs contain phycin, a proteolytic enzyme that breaks down dead tissue and promotes wound healing. They also contain psoralens and benzaldehyde, compounds with documented antimicrobial properties. The latex from fresh figs has been shown in studies to inhibit bacterial growth and support skin healing. But figs aren't just for wounds. They are exceptionally rich in soluble fiber, specifically pectin, which feeds the beneficial bacteria in the gut. They contain magnesium, potassium, calcium, and B vitamins in concentrations that make them one of the most mineral-rich fruits available. In a world without multivitamins, figs were the supplement. Fresh figs at their peak ripeness for gut health and energy. Dried figs year-round for sustained nutrition. And the ancient practice of applying crushed fresh fig to inflamed skin deserves far more modern research than it has received. Number 4. Dates. The date palm, the most mentioned plant in the Bible and the Quran. The original energy bar. The one that kept entire armies alive. Whether you were a soldier, a merchant, or a pilgrim crossing the ancient Middle East, dates kept you alive. Calorie-dense, naturally shelf-stable for months. Rich in minerals, fast-absorbing sugars for immediate energy. Dates are the original survival food, and the date palm is the most mentioned fruit-bearing plant in the Bible and the Quran combined. It wasn't celebrated for its beauty. It was celebrated because it fed people. Dates contain natural sugars, glucose and fructose, which are quickly absorbed into the bloodstream. But unlike refined sugar, they are packed with fiber, magnesium, potassium, copper, manganese, and B vitamins. Studies show that dates can improve iron levels, support bone density, and have documented benefits for childbirth. Multiple clinical trials have found that women who consume dates in the final weeks of pregnancy had significantly faster and smoother deliveries. Date tannins have antimicrobial properties. Even the pits were ground and used medicinally in traditional Arabic medicine. There's a reason why Ramadan is traditionally broken with dates. The body absorbs them quickly and smoothly after a period without food. 3 to 5 dates as a source of quick energy, as a natural sweetener in cooking, or simply to break a fast. Number 5. Pomegranate. Deuteronomy, the Song of Songs, the pillars of Solomon's temple. 200 pomegranates carved into the temple pillars. It was not decoration. The pomegranate appears in Mosaic law, in the ornamentation of the temple, and throughout the poetry of the scriptures as a symbol of abundance, beauty, and life. There were 200 pomegranates carved into the pillars of Solomon's temple. That wasn't arbitrary decoration. It was a statement about what this fruit meant, and modern antioxidant science is fascinated by it. Pomegranates contain a compound called punicalagin, found almost nowhere else in nature, which breaks down in the gut into urolithins. These compounds have shown remarkable anti-inflammatory effects and even potential anti-cancer properties in research. Pomegranate juice has been shown in clinical trials to reduce blood pressure, decrease LDL oxidation, improve arterial health, and reduce inflammatory markers such as CRP. Its polyphenol concentrations surpass those of red wine, green tea, and blueberries. And the rind, which most people throw away, is even more concentrated in medicinal compounds. Traditional healers throughout the Middle East use pomegranate rind tea for diarrhea, intestinal parasites, and inflammatory bowel conditions. Eat the fresh seeds. Drink the freshly squeezed juice. Or use the dried bark in an infusion for intestinal infections. Herbalists, we've got 5 foods. 5 sources of healing that have been in the scriptures for thousands of years, and that clinical science is validating one by one. But now come those with even more specific stories. Those that appear in specific contexts. Those who gave a name to a cure, a ritual, a miracle. And those that modern biochemistry is deciphering piece by piece. Food 6-10. The sustenance of prophets, soldiers, and pilgrims. Number 6. Lentils. Genesis 25. Esau sells his birthright for a bowl of lentil stew. That seemed crazy, until you understand what lentils do for the body. The most famous story about lentils in Scripture is a cautionary tale. Esau comes home hungry from the fields and sells his birthright for a bowl of red lentil stew. That seems like an absurd decision until you understand that in the ancient world, lentils were not considered poor people's food. They were survival food, dense, nutritious, stable during dry years, and nutritionally extraordinary. They were the food of soldiers, workers, and prophets because they provided what hard work demands: sustained energy, muscle repair, and mineral replenishment. Lentils are one of the highest sources of plant protein, about 18 grams per cooked cup, along with iron, folic acid, zinc, magnesium, and potassium. They have a remarkably low glycemic index despite their carbohydrate content, meaning they provide steady energy without blood sugar spikes. Their high fiber content feeds gut bacteria and lowers cholesterol. Studies show that regular consumption of legumes is one of the strongest predictors of healthy aging. Traditional preparation included soaking, slow cooking with aromatic herbs such as cumin and coriander, and serving with olive oil. That's not just culinary tradition. Soaking and cooking reduce anti-nutrients like phytic acid, which can interfere with mineral absorption, making their nutrition much more bioavailable. Cook them in soups and stews. Sprout them for fresh salads with added vitamin C. Use them in purees and as a base for vegetable dishes. Number 7. Barley. John 6. The loaves that Jesus multiplied for 5,000 people were made of barley, the grain of ordinary people, which turned out to be the most extraordinary. Barley isn't glamorous. It was the grain of the poor, of soldiers on campaign, of sailors at sea. When Jesus multiplied the loaves and fishes for 5,000 people in the Gospel of John, those loaves were made of barley, not wheat. Ordinary people ate barley. And it turns out that ordinary people were eating one of the most gut-friendly grains ever studied. Barley contains the highest concentration of beta-glucan of any grain, a type of soluble fiber so convincingly proven to reduce cholesterol and stabilize blood sugar that the US FDA allows a health claim on products that contain it. Beta-glucan forms a gel in the intestine that slows down glucose absorption, reduces LDL, feeds beneficial bacteria, and improves immune function. It has a lower glycemic index than wheat or rice, and studies show that it outperforms oats, already considered a heart-healthy food, in its effects on blood sugar after meals. For a grain that costs next to nothing and grows in almost any climate, it's an extraordinary food. Whole barley cooked as porridge or in bread. Pearl barley, more readily available today, retains less fiber, but is still one of the best sources of carbohydrates you can eat. Number 8. Ancient wheat, einkorn and emmer. Biblical wheat is not modern wheat. This distinction changes everything, and very few people know it. When the Bible speaks of wheat, it is not referring to modern wheat. This is a distinction that completely changes the conversation. He is talking about ancient varieties, mainly einkorn and emmer, which are genetically, structurally, and nutritionally completely different from the high-yield dwarf wheat that fills modern bread and pasta. Modern wheat was developed in the mid-20th century to maximize yield per hectare. It achieved this spectacularly, but in the process, it created a grain with a dramatically different gluten structure, higher starch content, and fewer micronutrients than its ancestors. Einkorn, in contrast, has 14 chromosomes compared to the 42 of modern wheat. It has a different type of gluten that many people who react to modern wheat tolerate without problems. It has more protein, beta-carotene, lutein, riboflavin, and antioxidants per serving. Studies on einkorn show that its starch is digested more slowly, resulting in a lower glycemic response. Its antioxidant content is significantly higher. The traditional preparation was slow-fermented sourdough, which also breaks down gluten proteins and phytic acid, making the grain easier to digest and its minerals more absorbable. Ancient bread wasn't a refined white loaf. It was dense, dark, and full of whole grain. You can find einkorn flour today. It's not cheap, but for anyone who's had trouble with modern wheat, it might be the wheat your digestive system was actually designed for. Number 9. Grapes. John 15. I am the vine, you are the branches, the most spiritually charged plant in the scriptures. And science knows exactly why it was so central. The vine is one of the most spiritually charged plants in all of Scripture. I am the vine, you are the branches. Grapes appear in Noah's first act after the flood, at the Passover table, in the Song of Songs, in practically every agricultural metaphor Jesus uses. This plant was central to life in the ancient world. And it turns out that for very specific reasons, fresh grapes, raisins, and grape juice contain resveratrol, quercetin, and anthocyanins. Polyphenol have been extensively studied for their effects on cardiovascular health, inflammation, and even longevity. Resveratrol, in particular, activates sirtuins, proteins associated with cellular repair and lifespan extension, and has been one of the most studied compounds in aging research over the past 2 decades. The skin and seeds of grapes contain the highest concentration of these compounds. Whole, fresh grapes with skin provide fiber, potassium, vitamin C, and vitamin K, along with these polyphenol. Raisins concentrate the sugars and minerals. Each form has its place. Fresh, in-season grapes with skin for maximum benefit. Raisins year-round for portable energy and nutrition. Grape leaves, still used in Mediterranean cuisine, were traditionally used to wrap food and medicinally for inflammatory conditions. Number 10. Wine in moderation. 1 Timothy 5 verse 23. Use a little wine for your stomach's sake. The Bible doesn't glorify wine, but it doesn't demonize it either. And the distinction matters. Be careful with this one. It requires nuance. The Bible doesn't universally praise wine. It also warns against excess. But it does treat wine used wisely and in moderation as medicine. Use a little wine for your stomach's sake. Paul tells Timothy in his first letter. The Good Samaritan pours wine on the wounds as an antiseptic. It wasn't a metaphor. Diluted wine, as consumed in the ancient world, has genuine antimicrobial properties. Studies show that wine at moderate concentrations kills common intestinal pathogens, including E. coli and Salmonella, more effectively than the same amount of pure alcohol. In a world without water treatment, a small amount of wine mixed with water was genuinely protective. The polyphenol in red wine, particularly resveratrol and the proanthocyanidins from grape skins, have been the subject of decades of cardiovascular research. The so-called French paradox, low rates of heart disease despite a rich diet, has been partly attributed to red wine consumption. The key phrase is moderation. A small glass of quality red wine with a meal, the way people actually drank in the biblical world, diluted with food as part of a community, is very different from what modern alcohol culture seems to be. This is one of those foods where the context of consumption matters as much as the food itself. Stop for a moment, herbalists. We're halfway through the video. 10 foods, 10 sources of healing that appear in the most widely read texts in human history, and that modern science is validating one by one. And what I find most fascinating about all of this is this. The people who wrote those texts didn't have microscopy. They didn't have biochemical analysis. They didn't have randomized controlled trials. He had observation, generation after generation of careful observation of what healed, what strengthened, what protected. And that, it turns out, is enough to reach surprisingly correct conclusions. Now come those with even more specific stories. The purifier, the spice Jesus mentioned by name, those who built the civilization of the patriarchs. Number 11, fish. The disciples were fishermen. The miracles of the loaves involved fish. It wasn't a geographical coincidence. It was the protein foundation of the most influential coastal civilization in history. Fish is everywhere in the Gospels. The disciples were fishermen. The miraculous multiplications involved fish. Jesus ate fish after the resurrection to demonstrate his physical presence. In the culture of coastal Israel in the 1st century, fish was the primary source of protein for most people. And it turns out that it may have been one of the most important dietary decisions ever made collectively. Fatty fish, sardines, anchovies, tilapia from the Sea of Galilee are some of the richest sources of omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA, on the planet. These are essential fats that the body cannot produce. They must come from food. DHA makes up a significant part of brain cell membranes. EPA has potent anti-inflammatory effects throughout the body. Research on omega-3 fatty acids is among the most robust in all of nutritional science. Regular fish consumption is associated with dramatically lower rates of cardiovascular disease, depression, cognitive decline, inflammatory conditions, and all-cause mortality. Fish in the biblical world was eaten whole, simply grilled, as Jesus prepared it in the Gospel of John. No breading, no processing, no frying in seed oils that destroy the omega-3 content. Nutrition was preserved because the preparation was simple. 2 or 3 portions of oily fish per week, prepared as simply as possible, as fresh as available. Number 12, goat's milk. The land flowing with milk and honey wasn't cow's milk. And that difference changes everything for the human digestive system. The land that flows with milk and honey did not flow with pasteurized, homogenized, and vitamin D-enriched cow's milk. It flowed with goat's milk, a fundamentally different food that the human intestine handles very differently. Goat's milk has smaller fat globules and a different protein structure than cow's milk. Its main protein is A2 casein, rather than the A1 casein found in most commercial cow's milk, which many researchers believe is better tolerated by the human digestive system. The fat particles in goat's milk are naturally homogenized. They don't separate and don't require industrial processing, and fresh, traditionally produced goat's milk is rich in beneficial bacteria, natural probiotics that support gut health. Studies show that goat's milk is easier to digest for people who have difficulty with cow's milk, produces less of an inflammatory response in the intestinal lining, and has a prebiotic effect that supports beneficial gut microflora. Its mineral content, calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium, is highly bioavailable. It also contains medium-chain fatty acids, particularly caprylic acid, with antimicrobial and antifungal properties. Goat's milk was sidelined by the industrial dairy industry because goats produce less milk than cows and don't scale as easily. Not because it's inferior, quite the opposite. Fresh goat's milk, fermented into yogurt and kefir for maximum probiotic richness. Curdled into simple cheeses for concentrated minerals. Number 13, hyssop. Number 13, the one I promised at the beginning, the purifying herb that modern biochemistry has just understood. Here it is, the one I promised at the beginning. Hyssop appears in the purification rituals of Leviticus. In Psalm 51, the most penitential of all the Psalms. Purify me with hyssop, and I will be clean. And it appears at the crucifixion, where a sponge is offered to Jesus on a branch of hyssop. For centuries, this was interpreted as purely symbolic. And then researchers began to analyze the swab and found that the symbolism was built on something real. Hyssop contains carvacrol and thymol, the same antimicrobial compounds found in oregano and thyme, two of the most powerful natural antiseptics known. Studies have confirmed that the cotton swab has genuine antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal properties. It has been shown to inhibit the herpes simplex virus. Its expectorant compounds help clear mucus from the lungs, and it has anti-inflammatory effects that explain its traditional use for respiratory infections and wounds. When you understand this, purification rituals suddenly make sense. If you used a swab for cleansing, for cleaning surfaces, for spraying on people and objects after an illness, you were applying a genuine antimicrobial agent. The instructions had a practical logic. They worked. Hyssop fell into oblivion in modern herbalism, discarded as a decorative biblical herb. But the science is clear. This little plant did real work in the ancient world, and it still can. Hyssop infusion for respiratory infections, coughs, and bronchitis. Hyssop tincture as a topical antiseptic. The fresh plant used in cooking as an aromatic herb similar to thyme. Number 14, cumin. The only spice specifically mentioned by Jesus. And they paid tribute with it. That says it all. This is the only spice on this list mentioned by name by Jesus. In Matthew 23 verse 23, Jesus criticizes the Pharisees for meticulously tithing their herbs, mint, dill, and cumin, while neglecting justice and mercy. The fact that cumin was being tithed tells you how much it was worth. Things of real value are tithed. Cumin has been used medicinally for at least 4,000 years in the Middle East, India, and North Africa for digestion, blood sugar, and infections. Cumin contains a compound called cuminaldehyde that has demonstrated antimicrobial effects against a wide range of bacteria and fungi. Studies show that it can reduce fasting blood sugar and improve insulin sensitivity in people with type 2 diabetes. It stimulates bile production and the activity of digestive enzymes, reducing bloating and improving nutrient absorption. And it is a significant source of iron. 3 grams of cumin provide around 20% of the daily iron requirements. Perhaps even more interesting, cumin has shown preliminary evidence in animal studies of anti-cancer properties and memory protective effects. The ancient world used it extensively and intuitively. Modern science is methodically confirming why. Ground cumin in everyday cooking. Toasted cumin seeds in breads and stews. Cumin tea for digestive discomfort. It was both food and medicine in biblical homes. Number 15. Cilantro. It appeared in the most miraculous food in the entire Bible. And science has found something extraordinary in it. When God provided manna in the wilderness, the scriptures describe it as, it was like coriander seed white. Whether that's a precise botanical identification or a comparative description, coriander seed appears in the most miraculous food story in the entire Bible. That's no small feat. Coriander seeds, the dried fruit of the coriander plant, have a rich medicinal history in Egyptian, Persian, and Israelite cultures. They were found in the tomb of Tutankhamun. It was used in ancient medicine for digestive discomfort, anxious nerves, and inflammatory pain. Modern research has found that coriander seed has genuine anxiolytic effects. Animal studies show that it reduces anxiety comparable to pharmaceutical diazepam in certain models. It contains anti-inflammatory compounds including linalool and flavonoids. It exhibits antimicrobial activity. And one of its most fascinating applications in modern medicine is in heavy metal detoxification. Preliminary research suggests that cilantro and coriander may help mobilize mercury and other heavy metals from tissues. Its digestive benefits are well documented. Coriander seed infusion has been used for centuries for gas, bloating, and intestinal cramps, and studies confirm that it reduces intestinal spasms. It was everywhere in the biblical kitchen for the same reason it's everywhere in traditional kitchens today. It made food taste good and made people feel better after eating. Ground coriander seed is used in breads, stews, and spice blends. Coriander seed infusion is used for digestive discomfort. Fresh coriander leaves are used liberally in cooking as a seasoning and functional food. Herbalists, we've covered 15, and now come the ones that have always been in your kitchen. The ones you know, the ones you use, but whose true power was never explained to you. And the last two on the list, those are the ones I find most impressive of all. Number 16, garlic. They mourn the garlic. When you understand what garlic does to the body, their grief makes perfect sense. This is one of the most emotionally charged food references in all of writing. The Israelites are wandering in the desert, eating only manna, and they break down and weep. And one of the things they specifically lament is garlic. We remember the fish we ate for free in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. They missed garlic so much it made them cry. If you understand what garlic actually does, their grief makes perfect scientific sense. Garlic is one of the most thoroughly studied foods in all of nutritional medicine. Allicin, the compound created when garlic is crushed or chopped, is a broad-spectrum antimicrobial active against bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. Clinical trials have shown that regular garlic consumption reduces the frequency and severity of colds and flu. Multiple studies show that it lowers blood pressure and LDL cholesterol. It reduces platelet aggregation. It has documented liver protective effects. Egyptian medical papyri list garlic in more than 20 medicinal preparations. The workers who built the pyramids ate it daily. Freshly crushed raw garlic is the most potent. Allicin is volatile and degrades with heat. Traditional medicine throughout the Middle East and the Mediterranean used it in every possible way. Raw in dressings and preserves, cooked in stews, infused in oil, even inserted into the ear canal for ear infections. Crushed raw garlic in dressings and preserves for maximum medicinal potency. Cooked garlic in practically everything else. The rule is simple. More garlic, more health. Number 17, onion. The prebiotic king of biblical kitchens. And microbiome science has just understood why it was so essential. Listed alongside garlic in the great lament of the desert of the Israelites. Onions were a staple food for all economic classes in the ancient world. Egyptian workers who built the pyramids were partially paid in onions and garlic. Pharaohs were buried with them. And science tells us exactly why they were so valued. Onions are one of the richest dietary sources of quercetin, a polyphenol with potent anti-inflammatory, antihistamine, and antioxidant properties. Clinical trials have shown that quercetin reduces blood pressure, inhibits inflammatory pathways, and can reduce allergy symptoms. But here's what I find most fascinating. Onions are extraordinarily rich in inulin-type fructans, prebiotic fibers that specifically feed the beneficial bacteria in the colon, particularly strains of Bifidobacterium and Lactobacillus. Before anyone understood what the microbiome was, the ancient world was intuitively building a diet that perfectly nourished it. Garlic, onions, leeks, all members of the allium family, all rich in prebiotics, were daily staples. The result was an intestinal ecosystem that functioned as it was designed to function. The sulfur compounds in onions also have detoxifying effects, supporting liver enzyme activity that processes and eliminates toxins. Raw onions in salads and pickles provide maximum quercetin. Cooked onions are great in practically everything for flavor and prebiotic fiber. And onion broth aids recovery from illness. Number 18. Almonds. The temple of God adorned with almond blossoms. A choice of extraordinary nutritional wisdom. God told Moses to design the tabernacle candelabrum, the menorah, with cups shaped like almond blossoms. Aaron's staff miraculously blossomed with almonds. The almond tree was chosen as a symbol of vigilance and divine initiative. It is the first to bloom in spring. And it turns out that this symbolic choice was backed by extraordinary nutritional wisdom. Almonds are among the most nutrient-dense foods on Earth, gram for gram. They are rich in vitamin E. 30 grams provide about 37% of the daily requirement in the form of alpha-tocopherol, a fat-soluble antioxidant that protects cell membranes from oxidative damage. They are rich in magnesium, which supports more than 300 enzymatic reactions in the body and is deficient in a large proportion of the modern population. They provide monounsaturated fats, protein, calcium, and fiber in a package that the body absorbs and uses with remarkable efficiency. Clinical trials have shown that regular consumption of almonds reduces LDL cholesterol, decreases blood sugar spikes after meals, improves the diversity of the gut microbiome, and supports healthy weight by promoting satiety. There's something even more remarkable. The fat in almonds is absorbed less than expected. The structure of the cell wall means that some of it passes through the intestine intact, feeding the bacteria instead of being stored. Raw or lightly roasted almonds as a daily food. Almond paste in cooking and medicine. Pressed almond oil for skin care and wounds. Number 19. Pistachios. If Jacob considered them worthy of a governor, he knew something that we were slow to rediscover. When Jacob sends his sons to Egypt during the famine to buy grain, he tells them to bring gifts to impress the Egyptian official. And pistachios are on that list. Genesis 43 verse 11. If Jacob thought pistachios were an appropriate gift for an Egyptian governor, understand what that says about their value. They weren't cheap, ordinary snacks. They were a luxury, a treasure. Pistachios are uniquely rich in lutein and zeaxanthin, carotenoids associated with eye health and protection against macular degeneration. They contain more potassium than most nuts, supporting blood pressure regulation. They have a high proportion of essential amino acids for a plant-based food. But what makes pistachios particularly interesting is their prebiotic fiber content. Studies have shown that regular consumption of pistachios significantly increases beneficial gut bacteria, particularly Bifidobacterium, more than most other nuts tested. They also contain resveratrol and other polyphenol that support cardiovascular health. Their relatively low calorie absorption, due to the cell wall structure, means they provide more satiety per calorie than their label suggests. A small handful daily as a nutritious snack. used as an ingredient in Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cuisine. They don't require much preparation to do their job. Number 20. Carob, St. John's bread. And here it is. Number 20. The one I called God's gift. The one I promised I'd save for last. Here we are. Number 20. The one I called God's gift at the beginning. The one modern oncologists are studying with growing interest. John the Baptist wore clothing made of camel's hair and a leather belt around his waist. His food was locusts and wild honey. For centuries, Bible translators and commentators have debated what locusts means here. Many scholars, especially those familiar with the Judean desert landscape, argue that it does not refer to the insect, but to the pods of the carob tree Ceratonia siliqua, known throughout the ancient Middle East as carob or St. John's bread. The carob tree grows wild throughout the region where John ministered. Its sweet, bean-like pods have sustained desert travelers for thousands of years, and combined with wild honey, you have a survival diet of extraordinary nutritional power. Carob pods contain around 50% natural sugars, but unlike refined sugar, they come packed with an extraordinary fiber content, up to 40% dietary fiber by dry weight. This fiber is primarily insoluble, making carob a powerful intestinal regulator traditionally used for both diarrhea and constipation. Carob also contains significant amounts of calcium, iron, potassium, and magnesium. It is gluten-free. It is caffeine and oxalate-free, making it safe for people with kidney stones who need to avoid chocolate. But here's what makes carob truly remarkable as a survival food. It contains compounds called condensed tannins or proanthocyanidins that have documented antimicrobial and antidiarrheal effects. Studies have shown that carob flour is effective against rotavirus and other intestinal pathogens in children. It was actually used in European hospitals for childhood diarrhea before pharmaceutical options became standard. The tannins in carob also bind to proteins and slow digestion, moderating glucose absorption and providing that slow, sustained energy that kept a prophet in the desert going for years. Raw carob pods as a sweet, chewy food, carob flour in breads and porridges, carob syrup as a sweetener and medicine for respiratory conditions. And here's the connection that ties this whole list together. Carob eaten alongside wild honey provides what the biblical desert diet required: natural sugars for energy, fiber for gut health, minerals for stamina, and antimicrobial compounds for protection against infections. If John the Baptist really did live on carob and honey, he wasn't suffering. He was thriving. He was eating two of the most medically powerful foods of the ancient world, while everyone else in civilization ate elaborate meals and grew weak. 20 foods, 3,000 years of history, and the same conclusion over and over again. Olive oil reduces inflammation. Honey kills bacteria. Barley lowers cholesterol. Garlic fights infections. Almonds protect the heart. The book was right. Except it didn't explain the mechanism, because the mechanism wasn't the point. Food was the point. Healing was the point. The people who wrote these texts weren't primitive herbalists. They were observant, extraordinarily observant, generation after generation paying attention to what healed and what strengthened, building their culture, their rituals, and even their sacred architecture around those observations. And we, with all our technology, all our double-blind studies, all our biochemical analyses, keep arriving at the same conclusions. That's no coincidence. The truth about human health hasn't changed. We've just taken a very long detour to get back to where we were. The question isn't whether these foods work. Science and 3,000 years of history say they do. The question is, how many do you already have in your kitchen? And next, how many are you using in their correct form? Is the honey you have truly raw? Is the olive oil extra virgin and cold-pressed? Or is it a refined blend with seed oils that has nothing to do with what they consumed in the ancient world? Quality matters as much as choice. The difference between raw medicinal honey and the golden syrup on a plastic bear is significant. It's the difference between food that heals and food that only resembles it. Herbalists, which of these 20 has surprised you the most? Are you on Team Medicinal Herbs, Team Ancient Grains, or Team Nuts and Fruit? Tell me in the comments. I read them all. Always. If this video has changed how you see the relationship between ancient knowledge and modern science, give it a like and share it with someone who needs to know that the most powerful wisdom is sometimes also the oldest.